Welcome to That's Church. My sister Emmy and I are on a mission to open our hearts and minds by attending different churches here in Utah. We're talking to the beautiful people that make their church a community.
Father Paul Trubenbach from the Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox Christian Church from downtown Salt Lake area with us today. We just recently attended one of the services and it was so beautiful. We were absolutely enthralled with it. It was just a really beautiful service, and we loved all of it. So can you tell us, Father Paul, a little bit about your journey? Like, tell us about your background. Did you always want to be a priest, right?
Yes, yeah, priest.
Okay.
It's a long story, so I'll give you the shortened version. My family was Lutheran when I grew up, and we had kind of this phenomenon that a lot of people experience, where every parish that we attended would get a new pastor, and that pastor would change a lot of things. And my parents hit a point where they said, we want a church that's not going to leave us. And we eventually went to an Episcopalian church with the pastor there, who was kind of very traditionally minded. And he pulled my parents aside one day and said, "You're looking for the Orthodox Church. That's really where you want to go." And he himself wanted to become Orthodox, but he didn't want to go to seminary again. He loved being a pastor, and he also had a lot of health problems, and he was afraid that he would die soon. Sure enough, 3 months later, after they had this conversation, he had a heart attack. And so we started searching again, and I was about 10 at the time, and my parents went to an Orthodox church. And I was sick the first Sunday, so I stayed home with, I think with my mom, and my dad came back and said, "We're going to go again next week." And we went, and we got in the car afterwards, and they said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "I think you're nuts. I think this is absolutely crazy. We're not doing this. This is strange. Too much standing. I don't know what's going on." Half the service was in Greek. And at the age of 11, me at the age of 11, we were brought into the Orthodox Church. And obviously I changed my mind later on. So for me personally, when I was in college, I went to Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. It's a Jesuit university. And I was studying political science and philosophy. I wanted to go to law school. I really wanted to be a speechwriter, kind of work in the background of politics, but I grew really disenchanted with politics. I realized politics doesn't have the answer, but I was more interested in the question, why do people believe what they believe? Everyone knows what they believe on every issue. What do you believe about gun rights, taxes, abortion? But when you get down to it, very few people can describe why they believe what they believe. And so I kind of went down this journey of trying to search out the deeper reasonings of why I believed what I did. And through that, I discovered it must be through my Christian faith. And if that's the case, I better find out what my Christian faith is. And so I started another kind of journey going down and looking at, well, I used to be Protestant. I'm at a Catholic university. Supposedly I'm Orthodox Christian. What does that mean? And so I started doing my own searching. And eventually I had an experience where, as I was doing homework one night, a memory kind of forced itself in my brain. I can't really describe it, but I couldn't stop thinking of this story I had heard about a somewhat recent saint who, when he had died, the nurses in the hospital where he had died, began preparing his body. And they took his sweater off of him and put it on the bed next to him. And in that bed was a paralytic. Well, when the sweater touched the paralytic, he could feel his legs. And within an hour, he was up and walking and saying, "This guy's clearly a saint." I couldn't get rid of this memory. And I started searching online and trying to figure out who this was. And search engines weren't that great back then. And I spent hours trying to search out who this was and couldn't find it. Eventually, I was able to calm my mind down a little bit and get myself to sleep. And about 2 nights later, the same thing happened. This memory was just like forced into me. I couldn't get rid of it. And I discovered Saint Nectarios of Aegina, and he's behind me. So he's got that prayer up there, but this is the one right there. St. Nectarios reposed in 1920, and he was known as St. Nectarios the Wonder Worker. And I was kind of shocked. I thought that saints who worked miracles throughout their lifetimes lived maybe 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, but not in the 1900s. And as I discovered him, I started discovering more and more modern saints, and I kind of became enthralled with learning about them. Fast forward a few months, I was reading the life of Saint Nectarios, and there's a scene where somebody in his life was asked, "What do you want to do with your life?" And he said, "I'm going to just be your companion your whole life. I'm going to serve as your secretary, your treasurer." And Saint Nectarios goes, "I'm not going to be alive forever. So why don't you become a priest?" And when I read that line, again, I can't describe it, but I heard a voice in my heart, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Why don't you become a priest?" And at that moment, I put the book down and said, "I guess I'll go to seminary." And that was that.
Wow, that's a journey. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That is really amazing that you came to your own conclusion and really ran with it. Like that is really awesome.
Yeah. I think there are moments in our life where the Spirit talks to us, and there are certain times when it's so, what did you say? Like,
Definite,
there's no question. Yes, definite. It's so definite, and there's no question that it was the Spirit talking to you. And that sounds like one of those moments for you. That's incredible.
Yeah, one of the ironies of that experience was about a week before I read that passage, I was with my sister. We were in a bookstore, and she saw that I was looking for some books on Orthodoxy. She saw that I was becoming more and more interested in my own faith, and she said, "I swear you're going to become a priest." And I looked at her and I said, "I will never become a priest. I will never become a priest." And about a week later, this happened.
Oh, there you go.
So she also might have helped you along.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Wow.
So
she helped prepare you.
Yeah, I promised St. Nectarios that if I ever had a son, we'd name him Nectarios. So my oldest son is named Nectarios.
Cute.
Wow, that is really cool.
Do you call him Nick?
Just Nectarios.
Just Nectarios. Okay.
Yep.
I wondered because we were saying that you remind us of our cousin Nick. So I just wondered if his name was also Nick.
Random connection.
Coincidence,
there.
Random connection.
Yes.
That's so cool though too, because I think sometimes people help prepare us for hearing the Spirit and for receiving that answer, So I think it's so cool that your sister had said that, and you were so definite that you would not become a priest, but maybe in a way it kind of prepared you to listen to that voice,
No, I think it's a good point that it's a good reminder that I was so certain the week before. And of course, after I made the decision, then some other people were like, "Oh, we knew you'd become a priest." I thought, well, where were you when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life for the past few years? But
why didn't you tell me?
That might be good. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. You could have brought this to me sooner.
Yeah.
We would love to learn more about your beliefs and history as a church. And we're just curious if there's any particular do's and don'ts that you guys follow.
Okay. Those are down two pretty different paths. So history and beliefs. The Orthodox Church really prides itself in the idea that this is the church that Christ himself promised, that the Holy Spirit founded, and that the apostles led. And so when we look through history, we always look for these four kind of threads that go from the time of the apostles until today. And the four threads are ordinations, doctrine, worship, and then results or holiness. And so what those are ordination means that the apostles ordained the successors that would take over the church after they had reposed. And those bishops ordained their following bishops, and so on and so forth throughout history. And so it's very important that we have that line, because the church is called the pillar and ground of the truth. Well, if you have ordinations that occur outside that line, suddenly you start to go, well, wait, which line is the pillar and ground of truth, when they start to disagree? So that first one's really important. The second one, doctrine, just simply means that what the apostles taught and believed is what we teach and believe. Of course, theology gets more elaborate over time. That's natural. It's going to happen. But we don't add to or subtract from what the apostles believed. We want to make sure that the core of what we believe is the same, and the essence of it has not changed. As soon as someone changes it, they've cast themselves out of that line. The third one, worship, it means not just what we do inside of the church, it means how we live as Orthodox Christians. And so if you look at the very earliest documents of how Christians were living, there should be some consistency. For instance, the earliest canons on fasting before Easter, what we call Pascha, it says that the Christians would fast from meat and dairy for 40 days, something that we still do to this very day. We also do that before Nativity, so we're in a fast period right now. And then what we do in the church, the very earliest documents of what Christian worship looked like, it's a perfect description of what we continue to do. So when you came to services for the Divine Liturgy, you could read some things from St. Justin Martyr, who was in the 100s, second century saint. And he describes how Christians worship. It looks exactly the same way. The fourth line is based on what I've already told you. That's to me the most important, and that's that does the church continue to make the same results? And we know what the apostles looked like before and after Pentecost. After Pentecost, they were new men, and they had gifts we could call the supernatural gifts. But they had new understandings. They were taught directly by God, and that's why the modern saints became so important to me, because through them we see that line continues on. You can't find a single year in the last 2,000 years of the church history where you can't find multiple saints who are living and accounts of people who knew them, who can tell you what it was like to be around them and the miracles that they worked and how they were taught not just from books but from prayer and directly from God. So this is kind of what the Orthodox Church, the core of the faith is that those four lines, when you wind them together, create this impenetrable, unbreakable rope. And so finding that rope is really important to us. Regarding do's and don'ts, that's a really broad question. I would just simply say that the Ten Commandments and the Beatitudes kind of lead us, and the Beatitudes become a model for what a true and very faithful follower of Christ should look like. And the saints give us the examples of what does this look like in action? What do the Beatitudes look like when in flesh? And so we would say that the saints are the saints are the gospel lived out in the heart.
That's interesting. That's kind of your core, what you follow, that and the commandments, the 10 Commandments, which makes sense.
About if you look at like a church timeline, we have little pamphlets in our church where it shows that the original church continues on, and that from that branches off a lot of different beliefs. And so for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, there was essentially one church. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but essentially there's one church without any major breaks. Now, you can talk about the Oriental Orthodox, or what are called the Coptics. That's an early break, but for the most part, what would happen is if a priest or a bishop came along and taught something that was contrary to the way the church had always worshipped and what the church always believed, if what that bishop or priest was teaching gained a lot of traction, the church would have what's called an ecumenical council. And it was a bringing together of all the bishops, and they wouldn't decide what the church believed. That's a common misnomer. What they would do is they would simply put into words what the church had always believed, because now that this bishop or priest was teaching something heretical, a different opinion about God, man, and their relationship, they had to set down on paper what they've always believed. The Orthodox Church is always a little hesitant to write things down. When we do, we're forced to do so, because human language just is never sufficient to write down these eternal truths and these divine truths. Eventually, about 1,000 years in, one of the highest bishops of the church, which are called patriarchs, the Patriarch of Rome, which is typically known as the Pope of Rome, made a change to the creed. And when he made a change to the creed, he stated that he had the authority to do that because he was not just bishop over Rome, but bishop over the entire church. The four other patriarchs looked at this and said, we've never done it that way. And that created what's called the Great Schism. And from then on, now you have Orthodox Christianity in the East and Roman Catholicism in the West. And we would see that as the first really large breakoff. And then, of course, you have the Protestant Reformation many years later, and that creates many other splits. So
That's fascinating. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, we have some of that in our own LDS church history. So it's always interesting to see those things happening in different religions as well.
Yeah, very cool. I have a half sister that lives in North Carolina, and her husband is Greek Orthodox, and he feels very strongly that that your church or his church is the original. And I love how you said the threads, just kind of going back to that. I like that visualization for me. I think that is really a good way to visualize it. So can you share with us some of the rituals and traditions? We were super intrigued by the spoon. We were like, what is on the spoon? And then we talked to the nicest lady after. Her name was Suzanne. She was so nice, one of your members. And she explained a little bit to us about converts and how they are blessed separately, and we noticed them up there. We didn't know who was who or anything like that. So kind of explain to us about those rituals and who does what and who can do what and all of that. And we were able to take communion, which we thought was really cool. So yeah, kind of help us visualize the separation of all of that and and what it is.
So what you received actually was not communion. You received the bread at the end. And so what that is in the Orthodox Church, we use a leavened bread. Unlike in Roman Catholicism, we have that flat, unleavened bread. We use a leavened loaf, so it's a large loaf and it's round. And before the Divine Liturgy begins, on that loaf there's a seal that's stamped into it. And in the middle of the seal, there's a square, and it says ICXENIKA. The IC and XE are the first and last letters of the name Jesus Christ in Greek, Isus Christos, and then Nika means victorious or conquers. That square is cut out, and that's put on a raised dish called a paten. During the liturgy, that particular portion is blessed, and we invoke or call down the Holy Spirit, known as the epiclesis, and we ask the Holy Spirit come and transform that bread into the body of Christ, and then the wine in the chalice into the blood of Christ. Then that is placed inside of the chalice. And so when people receive communion, we take the chalice and we take a spoon and we break off a little piece of the body with the blood and we give it to each person one by one. And the idea there is there's a lot going on practically that keeps us from ever risking dropping some of the bread. If we gave it in people's hands, which is how it was done originally, the problem is that some people would pocket it and bring it home. You could drop some on the ground. And so this keeps it safe from that happening. The other idea is that the church is called most commonly in the scriptures the body of Christ. And so, how does a Christian become a member of the body of Christ? They're brought in through baptism, but also by receiving the body of Christ. So if every member of the church is receiving the body and blood of Christ, then Christ is inside all of us. And all together, we form the body of Christ. And so by all receiving from the same chalice and the same spoon, it shows this unity, that the one body receives the one body altogether. Now, on a Sunday, we have two deacons who help out. And so we have three chalices, so you can't do it that way. That saves a lot of time. But that was communion that you were seeing. The rest of that loaf is then cut up into small squares, and it's blessed during the service, but not consecrated. So it's simply blessed over the altar and over communion, but it's not actually made into communion, and that's what's given out at the very end of the service. And that's called endidron, which literally in Greek means instead of the gifts or in place of the gifts. So if someone didn't receive Holy Communion, they can still receive this blessed bread. And that's how we do communion, and that's what that bread was. The blessing that you saw. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
the communion is taken by just the members. Is that right?
Correct.
And then
yes.
And then the other can be taken by everyone that's received at the end. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. The blessing that you saw in the middle of the service, we do a blessing of the catechumens. So a catechumen is one who has officially decided they want to be a member of the Orthodox Church, and they're in a formal period of instruction. And during that formal period of instruction, they can't yet receive communion, but before we do communion, a pretty good time before that in the liturgy, they come up and receive a specific blessing just for the catechumens. And that's what you saw there.
Okay.
That was the part with the golden cross, correct? Was that
that's
what
right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was beautiful to witness that. Yeah.
Yeah. We met some boys, young 18-year-old boys, before the gate was closed and we were all trying to get in. So we were all kind of gathered around, and it was actually kind of nice. I feel like it was almost designed.
Yeah, it was meant to be. It gave us a chance to chat.
Yeah, it was so nice that we had a minute to talk with them. And the one young man was so excited about your church. They were coming down from Cache Valley and staying overnight just to go to your church. And he's talked about moving here to convert and to continue attending. And we were just so impressed that he was so young and so interested. So I hope that continues forward and he's able to find what he's looking for. He told us also that he really feels like this is home, and that's important to find. So I thought that was really neat. Yeah. So hopefully he's one of the catechumens soon, right? Catechumen?
Yep. Yeah, he will be soon. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And how long is that process?
Catechumens. Yeah. So usually we have somebody who's inquiring come for about a month just to make sure that they understand a bit about what the church is, and they want to make sure they really want to do it, because the Orthodox Church is it's demanded in many ways. It's not exactly an easy faith. We fast over half the days of the year. There's a regimen of doing prayers morning and evening, coming to services that you can. So it can be tough, and that's exactly what Christianity is. Christ said, "If you want to come after me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me." If you want to live, you have to die, and so that's the Orthodox faith. So we like people to come for at least a month and really know what it is that they're trying to join before they become a catechumen. Then after speaking with me, once they become a catechumen, they're in that state for typically 9 months to a year. I found that anything less than 9 months tends not to be long enough. So that's usually a pretty good gauge. And so for 9 months, they are coming to services. They are beginning to pray and fast on their own. They're reading books and then watching catechumen lectures. And then after about 9 months, we check in, and if they're doing well and they're spiritually where they need to be, then we set a date for baptism.
Tell us a little bit about fasting. I didn't realize that fasting was such a big part of your faith. What days are chosen, and how does that work?
Yeah, so in a typical week, you're going to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. Wednesday is the day that Judas had decided to betray Christ, and so in memory of that, we fast, knowing that we betray him every time we sin. On Friday, this is the day that he was crucified, so in commemoration of that, we fast. The fasting is typically from meat and dairy, also wine and oil. So usually just simple meals, simple fruits, veggies, grains. And a lot of people will also only eat one meal a day during those days. And then we have 4 major fast periods. So we're in one right now. 40 days before Christmas, we'll also fast. And then before Easter or Pascha, it's actually about 48 days. It's 40 days for Lent, and then another 8 days for Holy Week and the weekend before that. Then there's something called the Apostles' Fast. The Feast of the Apostles on June 29th. We fast for the days or weeks preceding that. And that can be a longer fast or a shorter fast, depending on how late Easter is. So the later Easter is, the shorter that fast is. The earlier it is, the longer that fast can be. That gets a little complex. And then 2 weeks in August for the dormition, or the falling asleep, the repose of the Virgin Mary, who we call the Theotokos. And the idea of fasting should always be combined with prayer. There's a lot of practicalities to fasting. Whatever money you save with the food that you're not eating should go to the poor. That's the ideal. But the main concept of fasting that I typically describe is that when man is rightly ordered, we have God as our head, and then we worry first about the health of the soul, and finally the body. So the body serves the soul, and the soul serves God. But we've inverted this. We usually give care to the body first. Whatever the body wants, we give it. When we're tired, we sleep. When we're hungry, we eat. Whatever it is, we give care to the body first, and then we care about the soul, and then God's an afterthought. And so fasting kind of forcefully corrects this. And the fathers note that fasting was the first commandment given to Adam and Eve. It was, do not eat of the tree of the fruit, or of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So this is also kind of entering this paradisical state, this idea that we're trying to live almost angelically by giving the soul what it needs first, and feeding the soul through prayer. So again, fasting is never in isolation. It's always with increased prayer.
Especially the giving the money to the poor that you saved. That's really cool.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And it's similar to our church. We when we're fasting, we usually give like a fast offerings to the church, and then the church gives it to the poor or the needy within our ward or stake. Or so, yeah, that is similar.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how things are different but similar in a lot of religions, especially in Christianity. Mm-hmm.
And when we talked to Suzanne after the service, she mentioned to us that so many of the members in general are converts at your particular church. And especially, she said, I would say, I think she threw out a number like 85% or 80% or something of those 80% of members that are converts are LDS or coming from the LDS church. Do you find that to be true?
I wouldn't say it's that high. We have a pretty interesting mix. We've had this past year we've had kind of a large influx. It was normal at one point to have about 20 to 30 converts a year. This year, I think we topped out at one point at 65 catechumens or 63 or so. It's been kind of a banner year for growth, and I mean God's been merciful because we don't really do a lot of direct outreach. People just come, but the balance for converts has been really wide in many ways. We've had people come from the LDS faith, but also Catholicism, Protestantism, and a lot, frankly, from atheism and the occult, which has been really kind of fascinating.
Wow.
So I wouldn't say it skews that heavily LDS, but there are always LDS former LDS members who are catechumens.
Okay.
It's really interesting.
And honestly, we're grateful for that. That makes it easy, because when somebody comes from an LDS background, half the work is done. I don't need to convince them of the moral precepts of the faith. They've already agreed to that part, and so it's more about the doctrine. So for that, I'm actually very grateful. After COVID, people were kind of searching, and they were searching a pretty serious experience. They found that in Orthodoxy. And I'm not really sure what all the other factors are, but it seems like this is happening all over the country with Orthodoxy. A lot of churches that only had maybe single-digit converts are now well into the double digits, and it seems to be happening everywhere.
That is really interesting, because I've heard opposite, that people have been leaving religion, but it would make sense during a time as scary as COVID to be searching. So I don't know. I guess it probably just depends on the crowd, but that's incredible that your numbers have boosted that much. That's very telling.
I think there's also something to be said for so much of faith today, and not to be critical, but so much that it does feel very watered down. And people look at their faith and they say, if there's really no difference between me going to church and not going to church, if I'm the same person either way, I'd rather have my Sunday mornings off and get to sleep in and just continue to live and try to be a good person. But Orthodoxy, like I said, because it's demanding, I think a lot of people actually really yearn for that. They yearn for that structure in their life, and they want a higher calling. And Orthodoxy really calls a person to examine themselves and not just focus on the problems around them, but to say, where do the problems around me stem from? And you have to look deep within your own heart and realize, I'm the problem. I'm really the problem. And that for a lot of people, I think that's actually an attractive message, because they realize I can actually change and be a content person no matter what's happening around me. I mean, some of our greatest saints of the 20th century, they came out of the communist gulags, and there were people who were completely at peace with their lives. If you can be at peace in a communist gulag, you can be at peace in any situation, and that's what a lot of people, I think, are really searching out today.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are leaving religion, but also a lot of people are just seeking for what they actually believe, from what I've seen and in my own little part of the world, and what I see on the news. But it seems to me like, people are just searching for whatever it is. And so they're leaving maybe their religion to find something else. I think that's very common at the moment. Yeah, which is great. I think it's so good to find what you truly believe, and not just what you were born into or what your parents told you to believe. I think that to find something true to you, and that feels like home, like our friend that we met. I think
that young man that we met, who was only 18, was coming all the way from Cache Valley, and he shared with us that he had an LDS background, but that this just felt right to him. And it was really, I don't know, I think Emmy and I felt the same. It was just very impactful to see such a young person be so passionate about not just religion, but a new religion to them. like he didn't grow up with this. That was very impressive to us.
And especially one that is more demanding. I feel like a lot of people that I talk to that are struggling in our church are usually looking for something that isn't as structured, or isn't as rigorous or demanding. So it was really impressive to us that such a young person would find something that's equally demanding, or maybe not equally, I don't know, in his mind, but either way, impressive.
Like, I think sometimes we use the word demanding, but I'm sure, Father Paul, that you feel differently about your faith. I'm sure that you love doing those things genuinely, because I think you do start to get, when you find something that is so powerful and that you're so passionate about, that doesn't become a chore anymore. It becomes, I'm sure it becomes something that you really look forward to.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm the one who used the word demanding, and then when I heard you say it, I went, "Ooh, I'm not sure if I really like that word. I don't know that that's how we really look at it." it's
As
a high
I said
calling.
it too, I was like, "Is that the right word?"
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the right word. Yeah, it's my fault. I'll take the hit on that one. I guess demanding doesn't feel quite right, because that feels like an outward. It feels very authoritative. It feels like an authority is telling you what to do, and in that you get constrained. And Orthodoxy is not about that. Orthodoxy is really about saying, no, your heart is actually already constrained by all the wrong things. What? Try to have somebody cut you off on traffic and not get angry. Most people just can't say, "Oh, I'm just not going to be angry," or have somebody gossip about you and not get upset. Try to walk by, for men, walk by a scantily clad woman and not have lust. You're constrained. You can't really not do that just by force of will. And so when it's driven by love, and that's really the key. Orthodoxy teaches that the thing that really frees us is a pure love for Christ, and that it's our job just to empty ourselves of all that egoism that gets in the way. And the more you empty yourself of that egoism, the more room for grace there is. And then it doesn't feel demanding. And so the example I always give of this is, if I out of just force told you, go climb that mountain, and you said, why? Well, because I said so. That's miserable. Every step of the way is miserable. But if I say, go climb that mountain because at the top is the person you love most in the world waiting for you, or you can even give maybe a cruder example and say, there's a briefcase with $3 million waiting for you at the top. You're going to bound up that mountain without any problem whatsoever. I mean, it's going to feel like it's actually a joyful journey, and that's what the journey of Orthodoxy is. And that's why I think I step back with that word demanding. I don't know that we really see it as demanding. We see it as it's tough, but it's tough because our heart needs toughness. We need something tough in our life to tell us, if things are too easy, we become very soft, we become very lazy, and then the passions, mainly egoism, just can flourish, and they can consume you, and then you're miserable.
Yeah, the best things don't always come easy. I agree.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything in life that's worthwhile that is easy. What are the things that fulfill you the most? For me, besides my faith, I would say having a family, but raising kids isn't easy.
No, it's not.
Really difficult, but it's a joyful difficulty. You really love it, and that kind of shines through in I think everything we do. Anything you want to learn in life, what makes you love learning, a musical instrument? It's when you get good after a lot of practice and a lot of difficulty. It's the same with the faith. The more you live it, the more you kind of grind away at that egoism, the more you fall in love with it, and suddenly you yearn for those things. So I tell people, we mentioned fasting. I tell people all the time, my job isn't to teach you how to pray and fast. My job is to teach you how to learn to love to pray and to learn to love fasting. And when you do that, all of it's full of joy. I actually look forward to the fast periods now. That wasn't true when I started.
Wow.
At first, all I thought was, no bacon for 40 days. What am I going to do? And now I love those periods.
Yeah, it's less primitive and more from the soul and genuine. I think genuinity goes far, and it has to come from within the person and their own desires and their own love and passions, because otherwise it's not genuine. So
right, it's not their choice. It's got to be our choice.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about Greek Orthodoxy, and you guys are Antiochian. I hope I said that right. Antiochian Orthodox, and I know there's Russian Orthodox. So we were just curious: are all of these churches the same? And if not, what are some differences?
Yeah, they are essentially the same. We have the same beliefs and essentially the same worship. There could be little different expressions, but we do the same liturgy with the same words. So the reason that exists in the United States is because Orthodoxy was brought through immigration. And so as immigrants brought their faith, they eventually brought their own priests and their own bishops. And then we ended up with this. It's an issue. It's a problem that we have in the Salt Lake Valley. We have Antiochian Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, and Russian Orthodox. Ideally, we would have one Orthodox church fully united in the United States. We're united in the sense that I can go to the Russian church and serve with a Russian priest. I called the Serbian priest today to see if he could fill in for me when I'm going to be gone on a certain Sunday. Now we have this issue where we have multiple what we call jurisdictions, and we're trying to figure out what to do about that and how we can have just one American Orthodox Church. But the Orthodox Church is really okay taking its time with things. It doesn't feel forced to take care of these things right away. So slowly we're trying to figure out how to solve that problem. But for the time being, people can go to a Greek Orthodox church one Sunday if they're Orthodox, receive communion, and then go to the Antiochian the next Sunday and receive communion. There's no problem.
Okay. So you caused me to question, so do you have, you said the Orthodox Church is slow about doing things. So do you have a leader? Do you have one leader, like a pope or a prophet or somebody that runs the Orthodox Church?
Yeah, that's one of the big differences between Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy. We don't have one bishop that's over the entire church. Instead, what we have are local, what we would call autonomous or independent jurisdictions. And so, again, if you go to Romania, there's going to be a Romanian Orthodox Church, and at the very top of that is a Romanian Patriarch. And same with Serbia, same with Russia, same with Greece, same with many other places. And so that's one of the differences. So the Romanian Church can't go into Serbia and then interfere in their dealings. That's for the Serbian Patriarch to deal with in his synod of bishops. At the same time, it doesn't mean that one of those local churches can just go and make whatever changes they want. That's definitely not okay. You need to remain in the line of those four threads that we talked about. And once you depart from that, you're really no longer considered to be truly Orthodox, and there's probably going to be a council that's going to delineate what you can and can't do.
So, who is your patriarch? The Antiochian.
The Antiochian Patriarch is Patriarch John X. There's an Orthodox version of Wikipedia. It's called OrthoWiki, and if you look up the Patriarch of Antioch, you can see a list that begins with the Apostle Peter, who founded the Church at Antioch, and lists all the patriarchs all the way until John X today. And then over the United States, we have a bishop under him named Metropolitan Saba.
Really, that's really interesting that there are all these different, I don't want to say flavors, but that's what comes to mind, of, or I guess like different cultural Orthodox churches. And it does make sense because the United States in general, like you mentioned, is such a melting pot of cultures and people. And so that is kind of a beautiful thought, but also I could see how you'd want to bring all of you together.
We'd love some unity. At the same time, right now it seems to be working. We do all of our services in English. And just a little note on that, the only thing we don't do only in English, we do the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, in English, but we then often repeat it in I think about 9 different languages because we have people from all those different backgrounds. So that includes Greek and Arabic, Romanian, Russian, Serbian, Portuguese, and Spanish and Korean and French. So we have quite a few.
That's really cool. All of that on Sundays? You do all of?
Yeah, I don't do it every Sunday. Depends on how long things are that day and how much we have going on. But if it's not too long, about half the Sundays I'll do the Lord's Prayer in different languages.
That would be so cool to see that. Yeah,
I love the inclusion of that.
Yeah, and it is cool that there are different branches of Orthodoxy for people to feel more comfortable and hear their language. That's a beautiful thought. We would love to hear about your involvement, your church's involvement with the homeless community in Salt Lake.
Sure. Yeah, that's why when you came, the gate was closed. We were having a little bit of an issue that day with someone who's known to the community and has isn't always there, unfortunately. So when I first came, we had much more involvement with the homeless community. We had a group of about a dozen or so homeless who essentially made their home base somewhere around the parish. They would move, a little bit, but usually within the same block or two. We knew them all by name. They knew us. They protected the church. We cared for them. We knew who to let in the church, who not to let in, who to give money to, who not to give money to, and it worked. And we used to also give away bagged lunches on Sundays. Unfortunately, in Salt Lake City, there was a police initiative or a city initiative to clear out the homeless from one particular street called Rio Grande. It was called Operation Rio Grande. And when that happened, it made the population that was there on Rio Grande, which is not all that close to us, become much more transient and start going all over the place. Well, when they got into our neighborhood, the homeless who we used to serve came to us, and I still remember this one woman who really struggled with meth addiction. You could tell when she was clean and when she wasn't. I mean, it was clear as day. And she came and in tears one day thanked us and said she really appreciated everything we had done for her and for her friends. But this new crowd was just too rough. And she said that we probably wouldn't see them again. And sure enough, besides one or two of them, I have never seen any of them ever again. It's been a couple of years. So now the homeless community is much, much more transient and much more unpredictable. And if it were just homelessness, that would be an opportunity, but it's not. It's unfortunately mental illness and a lot of drug use. And because of that, we went through a really, really tough period where people were afraid to come to church. It was dangerous. And the police have been great, and they've kind of helped us out. And now it's a little bit more settled. But we've been asked not to give out lunches because it just attracts the crowds in. And so what we do is we do a once a month soup kitchen where parishioners come, they make soup, and then they drive out into the city and bring soup to people rather than people coming to the church. And what it ends up creating in the parish is that we get a lot of people who we don't know coming in, and we just have to watch. We watch closely, and if their behavior is okay, it doesn't seem like they're on drugs. It seems like they can cooperate and aren't disturbing people in worship. They're more than welcome to come in. As soon as it becomes a disturbance, which is unfortunately what you witnessed with somebody who was literally trying to set people on fire, then unfortunately we have to have them removed, and we have to sometimes have them removed not exactly in the most peaceful way. So we call the police quite a bit, but it's gotten better. It's gotten a lot better the past 6 months. I'd say we've seen a lot of improvements.
That would be so tricky, right? Being right downtown and so close to some of those communities. And it is so hard because you want to do everything you can to help them. But sometimes, it sounds like you did a lot of good, and that's great. That's great that you were able to have a time where
it's gotten to the point where everyone feels safe again, and that's great.
Yeah.
At the same time, the police have said, when you help by giving money, you're not helping, because that money just goes to buying drugs, and that creates more issues. And so they said you have to be really cautious. So we've become much more cautious, and we have a few regulars who come around who we know by name, but for the most part, like I said, it's a pretty transient community, and that creates some unexpected things. So, but we feel pretty good now.
Yeah, I have to say we were impressed with how it was handled on Sunday. The little incident that happened on Wednesday, I guess, not Sunday. But it didn't seem like they were purposely trying to set someone on fire, but they were dancing a little bit with the candle. So I can see how that could be a little dangerous. But
during communion, they did try. Yeah, unfortunately, you probably didn't see it, but they did try to put the candle right up against someone's back, and that's
not what you want.
That's rare, though.
We wondered if that's what was happening.
That's not common.
Right. And it was handled very well, and we never felt unsafe there at all.
No.
Like it was, and you could tell that that there was some mental health issues maybe taking place during that moment. But everyone was so kind, and you did escort them out, but it was done in a very graceful and a very patient, peaceful way, I thought.
And we loved that the gentleman was there right when they came in and kind of followed them around and made sure everyone was safe and they were safe. And anyway, it was very impressive. So it was great. It actually added to the experience for us because we thought, oh, that's really neat that everybody that is including this person, and it's okay until it's not okay, and
Right.
Yes.
and that you had a plan in place. So we were actually very impressed by it, and it kind of added to it for us. And we really did love like all of the rituals that you did. It really was such a beautiful, all of the singing and the like chanting. I don't know if you, maybe that's not the right word, but
No, yeah,
all of
that's the
the
right word. Yeah, chanting.
okay, ritualistic chanting type things, and it was so beautiful to observe. And I loved that everyone went around and kissed the saints, the pictures of the saints. Is that what they were doing? They were kissing the pictures.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the icons.
That is so cool. And what is is there an idea behind that, or it's just a notion of like warmth and love toward the saints, or
Sure.
is there
So,
something more to that?
Come back next week to hear the answer to this question in part 2 as we discuss more with Father Paul and get his insight on life after death and many other interesting details.
Thanks for joining us on That's Church. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for more updates, insights, and a glimpse into the diverse spiritual tapestry of Utah.
Let's keep the conversation going, because we believe that gaining knowledge of other religions does not diminish our own faith, but can instead enrich our spirituality. I'll cut that part out, by the way.
Is it Truenbach?
Trubenbach.
Trubenbach. Oh,
You got it.
I
That's
just
it.
took out the Ben.
That's
I
that's the
took
most
out the
common
B.
thing that people do. Yep.
That's funny. I just totally took out the B. Okay.
Yeah, reading
Truben-
it reads just like
Yeah.
that.
Why? I know. Why did
Yeah,
I do that?
that's funny.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
Trubenbach. Okay.
This is kind of our main prayer room / schoolroom / cat room / laundry room. So
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
cool.
I have some
Schoolroom.
rooms like
Do
that.
you homeschool children, or
we do. Yep.
how many kids do you have?
5 kids.
Wow.
3 of whom are being regularly homeschooled so far.
You can get with us, or you can get with it, or you can get with That's Church.